If you've just joined us, you just missed about an hour and 15 minutes of solid prayer.
I'm just slowly coming back to consciousness now.
Is that an hour and 15 or an hour and 50?
I can't remember, to be honest. Lost track there in the middle. Thank you again for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the last topic. We were just chatting, and it was a great topic. There's been some good feedback on it, and that's all we're hoping to really do is to maybe shine the light on some areas that things are always, people are always thinking about these things. It's probably better to chat them out than to develop negative or condescending thoughts around them. Or it's good just to chat them out and have a little conversation about the things that people are talking about. Tonight's conversation, we're going to chat a little bit about the idea of building crowds or building disciples and how the two can sometimes be mixed. Maybe you start on one path and end up on another. And obviously, as always, we're going to throw it to who wants to let off? Uncle Dan?
Just out of curiosity, how do I get this uncle tag?
I just like it, Uncle
I don't
Dan.
know,
Why
man.
can't I just put it this way? It's either Uncle Dan or Daddy Dan.
Oh, wow. I'll go with uncle any day of the week. Daddy Dan. That's horrible. That's a horrible.
Pastor
that's
Dan.
A horrible. That's just as bad. We'll go
Pastor
with
Dan. Pastor Dan to my right.
Dimwit Dan.
The
That's a
idea.
bit strong. That was a bit strong.
So Pastor Dan.
Yeah, I'll go easy.
The idea of building crowds versus, well, not versus, as opposed to building disciples. Opening thoughts on this before we dive in.
Yeah, I think if you think about like growing crowds, or the idea of the gospel is to advance it at the base level. So advancing it means obviously the communication of it, the presentation of it, everything that goes with it. But the fundamental, I guess, mission of Christians is to advance the gospel of Christ. The advancement of that happens through the local church and missions and different various works that happen all over the world. So the thought, I guess, is that growing a crowd is advancing the gospel. So is that, I think that may be, a little bit faulty because growing crowds, I actually personally believe it's a lot easier to grow a crowd than it is to build disciples, true disciples that follow Jesus. And I feel like, because the mission, I guess, and the goal is to, correct me if I'm wrong, is to advance the gospel of Christ. And that's outworked through the local church, through missions. So the bigger it is, seemingly the better. But is that true? Is it accurate? Because I think if you think about growing crowds in today's generation, obviously we have social media platforms, so it's we can punch it out there a lot faster. But if you think about it, to grow a crowd is something that, if as a church, just pull in some big name preacher, maybe get in a celebrity worship team, put on some pretty cracking, aesthetics in that auditorium, punch it out onto various social media platforms, get your people to push it out there. You will get people that will turn up. Now, that is what I call a crowd, but how much conversion from that, I guess, in the grind of going from there to building a disciple, I think is two very, very, very different things. To grow a crowd, I think, is actually easy, just kind of easier, not necessarily just easy, but it is easier than building disciples. So I think it's a good discussion to have because I think people can be in church but maybe not be a disciple of Christ. And just because something's big and has a crowd, is that does that translate into real disciples who are laying their life down for the cause of Jesus, or are they just following the crowd to the next big event?
Great opening thought. I guess just bouncing off that, the idea would be if you had a massive crowd coming, it doesn't actually remember the size, whatever the crowd is, the idea would be to see that the percentage ratio of that crowd not be like 20% discipleship or 20% staff or 20% people front two rows and 80% crowd, which is probably what you see a lot. The other scary thought is that it's probably 80% crowd funding 20% discipleship, and that's probably a concern. I don't know if those numbers are even closely accurate, but if you just think about what we see sometimes, the percentage of disciples or people who are chasing after Jesus, as opposed to the percentage of people who are there to view, consume, what we touched on earlier last time. Your thoughts on that, Scotty?
Yeah, I think to go sort of a level down, I think what we're talking about is the effort that goes into building a crowd is in many contexts much more than the effort that goes into making disciples. Is that a fair statement?
Fair.
Yep.
So much effort goes into, like you say, getting the social media right, getting the look and feel right, getting the sound right, making it look good so we draw people in, and then that's it. Or there might be a couple of other things through the week. So, and I agree with your statement. I think it is much easier to grow a crowd once you've got a bit of weight behind you, a bit of money to put into making whatever you're doing look really slick.
Yeah.
Attract people in that way. The discipleship part, which I'm sure we'll go into, is much, much harder.
It's similar to even in business with branding. Anyone in business knows that the product is important. It's actually second to branding now. It used to be, well, I don't know if it used to be, but it used to be probably like on par, have a good product but have an amazing campaign behind it. Now these days, because of the reach, because of social media and different platforms, you just need to have a product that is true to what you're saying it is. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking, it just has to be a product. If you have the best branding, you will sell the most of that product. So more people will go to that page, that whatever can people buy it. Similar to what you could see in a church, with the product being the show or the attraction or the building or whatever it is, more branding works. Like, it works to build crowds. But you would have seen it's hard to get people into the nitty gritty of discipleship because all of a sudden the other stuff, what you see, doesn't matter.
I agree. Like, I think, like, if you think about, like, even doing a conference or an event, being event driven.
Yeah.
That's I guess the idea of it being event driven church. The idea of that is to drag people from the outside in, and to get them in the door, and then walk them through the process. But the challenge with that is exactly what we just said. I think getting them in, that can be an easier process than once they're there, walking them from that to becoming a sold out follower of Jesus. That is the hard work, even as a preacher. And when I think about, so I've been in local church for 28 years now, actually, in the local church. So I'm a local church guy. I love the local church because I see it as people, not buildings or anything like that. So having spent a lot of years on the ground, and still am on the ground, doing that, but also the flip side of that coin is I've been, in traveling in various parts of the world and walking into an auditorium and, get up, grab a microphone. I'd be dead set honest, and I hope this doesn't sound arrogant or anything like that. It's a massive privilege. It's a huge honor. I never take it for granted or take it lightly. But to walk in, someone hands you a microphone, get up, preach for 40 minutes, 45 minutes an hour, that is way easier than being on the ground in a local church, grinding it away with somebody who's, selfish, egotistical, self-centered, and trying to drag them through drag them's probably a little bit harsh, but, trying to...
Considering he's sitting right here.
Wow. Wow.
Well, if we think about the years that I had to work with Scott, the turmoil and the energy that it was exerting.
Beating him down, just beating him down. He used to be 8 foot.
Now he's only 6
I'm
foot.
shrinking.
6 foot
the
2.
weight.
But honestly, I think I've been on both sides of that equation. And I actually honestly really love discipleship. I enjoy it. I can thrive with it. But it's a lot more grinding. It is a lot more. I think it demands a lot more from us as believers, as opposed to growing a crowd. Sure, I may punch out a lot of sweat, energy, planning, prepping, dragging. If we're putting on an event, I've got to pull the teams together and, have meetings. We're talking about all the things to plan. It's all this stuff.
Love meetings.
Yeah, there's all this stuff happening around it to put it on. Sure, there's a lot of energy being exerted. But then, a few thousand people turn up. Whatever. It's amazing.
And then we go home.
And then we go home.
Yeah.
But then, the conversion of that is, that's where it's different.
I love that example you just said there, because I think what some people might say in response to what we're talking about here, if we're going at that, the effort that goes into building crowds, is that, well, I am discipling. And I think teaching's part of it. So a lot of people would say, well, I'm discipling on Sundays. I think teaching is a part of it.
Yep.
But if we go back to the Jewish context of what discipling was, it was like you were imitating your rabbi, your teacher.
Yeah.
So you were in their life, you were in their home. And I think in just reading some of the history of that era. So if we're gonna get this right, we need to go back to the original context. Was that a rabbi was seen higher than your own flesh and blood? So your flesh and blood brought you into and that can go into weird places. So I'm not saying that's where we need to go, but your own flesh and blood brought you. And it's not that you cut them off and said goodbye. They brought you into the world, but your rabbi, your teacher, who was discipling you, he was to take you into the world to come. And Jesus being our ultimate example, who we follow. But the thing is that happens Monday to Saturday.
Yep.
When you're around my home, you come and watch how I treat my wife. How you come to see the real me, not the projection of me. And that costs a lot. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So here's my thought. This is just on my experience. So I went through the church where I was saved in an environment that was very much about. It was event driven, but the events were intentional towards casting the net.
Yep.
Certain age group, especially here on the Gold Coast, it's effective. I actually still hear people talking about that stuff now. Even just people. But one of the guys who works with us here, he went along to one of these church events once because he knew some young people that were going. He's not a Christian. He went. He liked it. It was cool. So he would never have gone if it wasn't for that. But what you were just talking about before is the effort that goes into planning something big. So it's almost like you put on an event and you see a couple of people's lives changed, which is amazing. One soul is important. But all that effort that goes into, say, one big event, not just the effort, the money, all the time of the people involved, the meetings upon meetings upon meetings, are we seeing the harvest relevant to the effort going in?
That's kind of I guess it's the point I think we're trying to make is
because it's not a black or white. There's got to be a balance.
Yeah.
Cast the net, disciple.
Yes. If we use the corporate terminology, the ROI, the return on investment, with all the meetings and all the, say, rehearsals and all the planning and all the energy, time, effort that's exerted, I often have asked this question, and I've definitely dropped the ball here and failed, if you're going to use that word. I'm like, man, what about if we just told someone, what if I just told my neighbour about Jesus?
Yeah. I agree.
I feel like
sometimes Christians don't even have time to do that.
No, that's right. I feel like our generation. That's why I feel like it's easier growing a crowd, because I can appease my conscience by I'm a part of all this stuff, and I bring them into the event. So I bring my friend or whatever, but it's your job now to get this guy saved. It takes I guess it can take the intensity or the confrontation of me having to share my faith, and then that person gets saved and I've got to walk them through to wholeness, because it's not actually the pastor's job. I don't think it is. It's not the pastor's job. It's not the whiz-bang teacher or whoever it is. It's actually us, me, you, the next person. We're called a disciple. And so, I think that the return on investment, how good is it? I just think it's a lot easier for us to do the crowd growing, as opposed to the walking and the discipleship.
Because what happens is, as soon as the event's over, you plan on the next one.
Yeah, literally,
absolutely.
Yeah,
You're
got to be bigger and better.
You're actually already before it's finished. You're selling tickets to the next one.
Yes,
you are. 100%.
Literally,
it's true.
Because you can
if you thought this was good, wait till the next one.
You can buy now for half price to be here next year.
Yep. Now, I don't think we're saying we shouldn't do this.
No, and I want to tell a story.
Oh, look.
I want to tell a
story time with Brody.
Yes.
Story time,
Let's
because This is why I find this a challenging conversation, because it's very easy to sit on the outside as someone who's never paid for an event. I've definitely served in events, and I've definitely been involved and poured it out and been a part of that. So it's not about ripping them down at all, because I think they're great. And I think they're great too because it was a conference, local conference here, local church I was going to, in 2000 and, geez, it must have been 15, maybe 16. Now, we were packing down, and this is going to go into the power of media and all that sort of stuff, right? We were packing, it's now midnight, so just pouring it out, boys. Just pouring it out,
wow.
right? Packed down at midnight. And I'm with my mate, and I get a phone call from another guy, and he's in Perth. And this is the guy I was in the Navy with, and he struggled for a long time with, man, some savage addictions. He had a really hard life. And I already tried a couple of times to get him into rehab and just kept reaching out. He calls me at midnight. Hey, I was just watching something you shared on Facebook a couple of hours ago, and I don't know what's going on, but something's going on with me, and it was really powerful. This guy knows nothing about Jesus. And all I shared was one of the preachers that was there just shared the message because they had it on Facebook Live or whatever it was and just shared it. He watches it. So we just get on the phone and we can just feel God in the moment, and we're like, man, this is an opportunity now. So we're on the phone for this guy for about 2 hours. I ended up grabbing Grant, me and Grant are together, and we're sitting in the car park at the church, and it got to the point where this guy, we just talked to him about Jesus. Man, like, you got to get your life sorted. This guy's, he was 30, probably 35 at the time. He had kids that weren't allowed to see him. He had a wife, an ex-partner that had AVOs at him. His parents had AVO. Like, ice addict gone mad and dangerous. So that was his life. That night we shared the video that he watched it. He failed at trying to kill himself. So that's how low he was. So then we're sitting in the car park and we just feel this like, hey, you need to say this prayer. It starts now. We walk through the prayer. He gets halfway. He can't say that. He basically can't ask for forgiveness for his sins. He's struggling there. Man, you could feel the spiritual weight in the car at this moment. We're on speaker with this guy in Perth, and finally gets over the line. He accepts Jesus and radically saved through a phone call, no one with hands on him, through a message that was preached on the Gold Coast that was shared via Facebook from a big event put on. So for me, it's personal. It's one person, so I'm kind of like at the same time. But he didn't have a big church to go to right after this. So for the next 12 months, it was me on the phone, like daily, trying to disciple in the best I can. And I was so junior myself then, but all I knew how to do was like, man, this is how good God's been to me. I don't know much about the Bible. I barely read it, bro, but I hang out with people who do. You know, and I was like, so that we got from then, man, fully restored. He went to rehab. He got clean. He ended up going to a little church, hung out with old people who shared the word with him every day, got connected in. He then went into like fitness comps. He runs like triathlons, got his kids back, fully restored.
It's awesome.
From a big conference that was put on, shared via Facebook, life changed. And now he goes everywhere and talks about Jesus. So I say that to say, where's the balance? Because that's just one. Yeah. And there'd be so many of those people as well.
I think the key was that you were discipling him after that event.
100%. That's right.
And I think, I'm pretty sure this is what they used to do with, his name has slipped my mind. Who's the biggest evangelist in America who's passed on now?
Billy Graham?
Yeah, Billy Graham. They would make sure.
Did you just forget Billy Graham's name?
That's pretty bad. We'll edit that out.
Cut. No edits here, boys. No
Legend.
Single swim.
The kind of up there with Paul the Apostle. What was his name
Who's
again?
That guy? It starts with J.
So good.
I think what they would do, they'd really make sure that wherever the travelling ministry went, they connected locally with church communities.
Yeah.
So that if people gave their life to Christ, they would then be connected into.
Had somewhere to go.
Yeah, they'd have somewhere to go and be discipled and be part of a community. So that's the balance, I think.
Was having the follow up.
On that, you guys might be able to tell me. I have heard conversations around that crusades in the big crusades they do in different parts of Africa and stuff that they put on these big crusades, but quite often there isn't anywhere for them to go after that.
I've done some there,
Yeah.
but I've only done them based on that side of it, where I've said, okay, well, where's the actual how these if
How
if
they're
people
gonna
get
plug
saved
in.
when
Yeah.
if
What
and when
next?
or when they get saved, and then part of that because our ministry would put a large investment financially to it. Like we're not taking anything out of the place. We're pouring into it. So
Imagine $1 a head.
So, well, that's kind of how we worked. Or did like a budget. Part of that budget was okay. Well, how's the, after the, the preaching, the big event, whatever.
Yeah.
How's this going to work? So I think, that was a prerequisite. It should be too.
So again, I think coming back to what we said earlier, we're questioning the amount of effort that goes into the events. Is it the same as the effort that goes into to discipleship? I think that's the question
Yep.
we're trying to highlight here.
I think it's a lot. Personally, I think it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
The budget's a lot lower. Discipling is a lot less.
Not as glamorous.
It's definitely not as glamorous.
You don't sell
and,
it.
That's it. I remember. So my first 11 years of ministry, little story time. Jeez, we've got a few stories here.
Damn.
My
I'm
first
feeling inadequate here.
it's going up. You'll come up with one
Quick
right
think
down
of
now.
What's that guy's name again?
Yes, Billy Graham. Sorry, Billy. We love you, man. You're the man. Can't wait to see you up there.
Absolutely.
So the first 10, 11 years of my ministry was working with young men between 18 to 35 years of age who would come out of jail, out of, horrible situations off the street, and they would live on a property that we had for 12 to 14 months, like a rehab. I hate that word rehab, just a personal thing. We call it a training centre. Nothing wrong with rehab. It is what it is, but I just didn't like it. So we call it a training centre. And at that place, that there was we had 40, 50 students. We called them students. You'd see these guys every single day. The good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
I can't tell you those first 10 years of establishing. I kind of look back on it now and I can see how God put me through that, not for me to teach them, but for them to teach me. Because walking with these guys from those horrible, just really messed up situations, through seeing them every day in their darkest moments, they're cursing you, they're spitting on you. I've had guys run at me with knives, called everything under the sun. It taught me a lot about the love of Christ and the hard work that it is to disciple someone, teach them through the Word, walk them through the Bible and pray with them, allow the Holy Spirit to do His work. So we were doing that, but then I was a part of a massive church. And we would go to conferences. We'd take the boys to the conferences. I can't tell you when I was there, I'm looking around going, man, it looks so much nicer at this conference and feels really incredible. And it should. I'm not knocking that. It actually should. But then the reality of walking out of that environment into this guy's life, I think there is a gap there.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a gap there in our generation. A lot of younger guys, man, they're enamored by the lights, the camera, the action.
Yeah.
And they don't want to get down, take roll their sleeves up and just work at it. Because it's tough sometimes. And so I think can be a lack there because it's not glamorous. It's really not. It's not, man. Who wants to sit down with someone at 2:00 in the morning when they're vomiting?
It's true.
Not many people. I think a lot of people do.
Yep.
Because it's hard. I'd rather be up on a stage with a microphone any day of the week.
Yeah.
But, I think it's an interesting dynamic.
So, Scotty, looking from the outside at all the different churches we have around the world, I'll try and word this question for you nicely. So many churches, they either start with an intention to grow or they start with an intention to be healthy. I think some say they want to be healthy and grow. That's to be healthy and grow, you're going to grow slower, numbers-wise, to be healthy. That's just kind of would you agree with that kind of, to stay healthy, you'll grow slower?
Oh, yes, yeah.
If I look at where I go to church now.
Yeah, there can be unhealthy growth if
that's what I'm
you're
saying.
asking. Yeah.
So
I agree. I think they can.
If you start with the idea, I just want to grow, or you start with the idea to be healthy, growth will happen here at the healthy place, but it will be slower. growing over here, you'll grow no matter what. Like you can come up with a formula to grow, but you're not guaranteed to be healthy if you're not intentional about it.
Yep.
Do you think that it gets to a point where the leadership of a church can look and go, hey, we're growing so much that we've become unhealthy? Like, do you think that they must be able to look there and go, how many disciples do we have? Or do you really think they just care about getting bigger and bigger?
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of both. Is it Francis Chan?
Yeah.
Francis Chan just shut his church down because that exact reason. He had a rehabilitated drug user come into his congregation, and I think it was a mega church. It was thousands.
He was massive.
Well,
Massive.
he handed it on.
Did he?
To,
Okay.
yeah, to his someone there in the board. He
Oh,
did
I
it.
thought-
He did it really, really well.
I thought he closed it down. Okay,
he handed
so
it.
he handed it on,
It was
but
a big deal.
From my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the final straw where he's like, this guy's come in and he's walked away after however long. Now that happens at times.
Tell
but
the whole story about because the guy who walked in,
Yeah.
it was a drug addict, right?
he was rehabilitated, found Christ, came in, but wasn't discipled, and he walked away from that community because, from my understanding, that was why he couldn't connect. He couldn't find people to follow. He couldn't find anyone to imitate. Now, not saying in this context, I think Francis Chan was saying, I've got to question the environment. We're putting all this effort into all these other things, and someone who has given their life to Christ has walked away because there wasn't community there for them. And so maybe that's an example of where he's got to the point where he's really questioning, is what we're doing here discipling people? We're doing lots of things well. And I'm assuming he said no. For him personally, he had to get out.
Yeah, he's gone to a more home church type thing, right? Like
Yeah,
where he
so-
has put some. I think he kind of has a pastor over kind of each, like almost like a neighborhood kind of thing. The other side is it's hard when people walk away and say I couldn't get connected in because there's also got to be ownership on.
Oh, 100%.
So
Yeah.
there's both
that's-
sides of it.
100%. And I was being clear, I think, in this context,
Yeah.
the way that he was talking about it was, this is why he
He obviously
left.
felt that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't that.
This
kind of-
wasn't a, consumer Christian saying, I haven't had my needs met.
Wasn't a
This
hard
guy
issue.
was searching. What's that?
wasn't a hard issue.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a hard issue. He wasn't
Yeah.
bitter. But I think that's just innate with I think that's where we talk about unhealthy growth. In large environments, it's very hard to disciple.
Yeah,
You can't.
it's difficult.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Because I agree with health, like health and growth. Healthy things by default grow.
Yeah.
You don't have to force the issue. Clearly, a different, these scenarios are worlds apart, but you'll get the drift. A baby in a womb grows by default, and mum's not forcing it. She just eats right, feeds it right, what she's eating, drinking, and the baby just grows by default. If she's healthy, if the mum's healthy, the baby's healthy. Now, obviously, church's life is very different, a lot more dynamics to it. But the same principle, I think, applies. If it's healthy, it will grow. But health is... Because I think you can have... I do believe you can have unhealthy growth. And I think growing crowds, I think, can produce that unhealthy growth. So I'd like to think, as a church, we would like to say our health is here, like this wide, but our growth is here.
Yeah.
And the growth is tracking behind the health,
Yeah.
which is okay with us. I think you can have I think you have churches and ministries that the growth is here, but the health is here. And
Other way around.
Yeah, it's the other way around. And that's because I think we go after growing crowds. That's what happens. But I think if you slow down, because healthy does take time. I think, it takes time. It's a process. It's time. It's just staying committed, staying faithful to the. And it's just, I don't think any of it's glamorous, actually, to be honest.
No.
I think a lot of it's just keeping your head down and, your backside up and doing the work of the ministry, walking humbly before the Lord. And because if you think about, let's look at this. You think about our life, right? I looked up the other day. I think I've got this right. I've been alive 16,500 days.
Okay.
Based on being 45 in July, 44 years. Now, in those 16,000 days, if I started going through what I remember, like as highlights, the day I got married, My 3 kids were born.
This.
Episode 1.
You ever heard your silent screams out? My silence is screaming out.
Episode 1.
Episode 1.
Your mic dropped out there.
That's 4 here. Another one would be when I jumped out of an aeroplane when my boy was 7 on his 7th birthday. It's like 5 days. I'm starting to scratch the bottom of the barrel. The point I'm making is the 16,495 days, whatever it is I've been alive, are actually forgettable.
Yeah.
But they're actually what made me and built me and shaped me and formed who I am. And I think that has a lot to do with, I think, discipling as well. It's not. It's not the. It's not the. It's not the. The what do you call it? The bigness.
The wow moments.
The wow moments. It's actually, well, no, man. It's the. It's the real, the day in, day out.
I thought I had. Sorry, Scott. Before you jump in, I thought I had about why we're saying when we say that. What is unhealthy? So we're talking about, say, healthy versus growth. What does unhealthy look like? It's easy to say something's it's unhealthy or toxic. When I think of unhealthy, and if I think it's unhealthy because of the growth, one thing I just thought about before that I've noticed in churches that grow fast, the reason the discipleship starts to drop off is because the guys who are great at discipling are now untouchable.
Yep.
There's no time. So because you're growing, you're scanning for leaders, to people to take charge of this thing and, hey, let's keep growing this thing, which I think at its core is amazing. That's kind of great to be able to grow it. The only reason it starts to become unhealthy is because you're taking all the best guys and putting them in A grade, but there's no one to clean the sheds. There's like everything else is falling apart, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like the best guys become untouchable, but now there's no one learning. And it creates this big divide before the first 2 rows and everyone else.
Because they're busy doing events and getting ready for events and other things where they could be sowing into people's lives.
Well, they're focusing on growth now. And so then there's the ownership on, okay, cool, connect groups. You have to be in a connect group to, one, to connect in, be in a connect group. But quite often the connect groups are kind of so forced.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I've been in some great connect groups and cell groups or whatever terminology you want to use.
Groups and
But then I've been in ones where it's just like a little mini Sunday service where one person's talking. There's no life in them.
A little mini Sunday service. I don't know if I've heard that before. A mini Sunday service.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Some that are forced.
Yeah.
Some that are forced. And
you can't. I don't think that's a good point. You can't force discipleship because it's based on a relationship.
Yeah.
And this is what I see when everything's event driven: is the relationship takes a backward seat because I turn up to the event, I'm pumped, I'm in a good mood. I can put a face on for the time being, and whether every Sunday's an event in your context or it's a conference here or there or whatever it may be. They're good. They're good to go to and whatnot. And like you say, there's some amazing stories that come out of it. But the discipleship part is relationship based. It's being in people's lives. It's the messy and the beautiful together. You can't get away from that, and it costs.
Yeah.
So
if I was to think to break it down to, hey, I want to grow. If I was building a church, and I want to grow it because I want it to be big because God's spoken to me about having this big church. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the way I would try and think about, hey, how do I pick the leaders around me? They can't be the guys who are best at discipling. You have to kind of think like strategy-wise, pick guys who are good at leading, but then guys who are really good at discipling, they need to know there's value in that. There's value in the discipleship element and the pass element. There's value in stepping up and being the guy who MCs and being the guy on staff. They need to know that, hey, there's disciple as opposed to chase a staff position.
Well, that's another good point is if we're talking about discipleship being imitating someone, the imitation's going on all the time, but what are they imitating? If all they're imitating is how we put on events and how I act at an event, then I don't know.
Oh, you're just producing 100 good operations managers.
100%.
Yeah. Which I will hire.
If you're out there.
But they won't build culture.
Do you know what though? Do you know what the thing is though? Is you go into you talk to people in your travels, and I feel like people are really hungry to be discipled. that aren't being discipled. I feel like I feel like a lot of people aren't being discipled who probably don't have the language to put around it, but would like to be. Would like to have someone further down the track than them that they could go to and bounce ideas off and have just tap into their life. So
true, because you can't like you said it before. You can't force. Like
and it takes time.
Yeah, I'm never going to say to anybody, I'm discipling you. You're going to be on my side. I'm going to mentor you.
Call me pastor.
Yeah, I just think that's really warped. It's actually that person's. They've got to want that as well, and I've got to be ready to disciple them or mentor them. Somebody asked me the other week about this. They said, "Oh, would you?" They asked the question, "Would I like just say to them, I'm going to mentor you?" And I said, "No way.
Yeah,
not in a million years.
Yeah,
it's an issue of relationship.
Yeah,
and we walk that out. And
what if you see something in someone that they don't see themselves?
What's that?
What if you see potential in someone at church, just got saved, and that guy's a leader or whatever you want to call it, any gifting, and they're not bringing it out? Have you learned over years that you can squeeze it to try and get it out, but ultimately they need their own revelation? Is that your thought behind that?
Yeah, because I've definitely done that, what you
Both
said
ways.
Then, in an unhealthy way.
When you're building a team.
Yeah, I'm like, mate, you got the goods. Mate, you're talented, you're gifted. God's hands on your life. Let me work with this. Come on, man, let's go. And they're like, oh, sure, let's go. I'm not.
You just haven't felt it works as well.
I think it has worked, but I'm not. I think I prefer to go the other way these days.
Yeah,
I'd rather sit down with someone and then they're like, hey man, can you mentor whatever disciple? I'm like, mate, it would be a privilege.
Yeah.
But here's what it's going to look like.
I think what's good about what I've just learned it over the last year. I think a really important thing about discipleship is it's not just being led by someone, being directed. There's a difference to have someone who says, hey, read your Bible, do this, don't do that. How's your relationship going? That's different to building a relationship with someone and being open and honest.
100%. Yeah.
So, I've known Dan now for whatever it's been, 18 months, 2 years, how long I've known him. There's things that I would share with him now that would keep me accountable.
Yep.
Because we have a relationship, I trust him, that I would never have shared even 6 months ago, whatever, a year ago, if he was just say my leader or whatever. So there's got to be an element around discipleship that is so relational that you really trust each other.
This comes back to the submission thing.
Yeah.
Submission is mine to give to the leader, or to my rabbi or my teacher or whoever it may be. Wherever I see a piece of Jesus in that I want to follow and imitate, that's up to me to submit to that grace in that person. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is someone hasn't come in and said, "I'm going to disciple you." It just happens naturally.
Yeah.
Well, I think you just get really good at doing things if someone does that.
Yeah.
So I can sit under someone and I could be like, man, they are an amazing leader, and I can see value in me being better at leading by following them.
Yeah.
And the result will be if I operate the way they do, and I watch how they speak to people and watch how they use words and watch how they lead and watch how they converse, and I will grow as a leader. But there's no real revelation around that. My heart's not changing. I'm not getting closer to Jesus. I'm just being better at leading, which will serve me great in a workplace or whatever, but ultimately it's not making me a disciple. So while I think there is value in people learning their leadership gifts, I think there's so much more value in people being discipled and their heart changing, because then they change forever.
And this is the other thing with the event-driven thing, building crowds. There's not the room for a lot of that stuff to happen naturally. Where, I'm a believer that whatever community you're a part of, I think God's got provision there for you. But is that community giving space to those relationships forming, so that you have the opportunity to start learning of someone?
About the workshop.
Because it's...
and this is the point I'm getting at. Discipleship is not
1 hour workshop.
It's not
1 hour workshops.
You don't legislate it.
Come and listen to my teaching.
You don't legislate it. You shouldn't. This is what you're going to do every Tuesday. This is how it works. I agree. I think relationships are powerful because in that context, people trust, they observe, they watch this, and this opens up someone's heart to say, I can trust you, you know, I'll submit, whatever you want to use there. But I think relationship, which comes back to time, because it's not just an overnight thing.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any right, and this is where I think some younger guys can miss it in the younger generation, because they can be given a title but they don't understand authority. They think a title brings authority to go, okay, this is what I'm going to do, you should follow me. But authority comes through, you know, time and faithfulness and commitment, and people watch you, they watch what you say, they watch what you do day in, day out, they observe all these different things, and your authority comes from that.
Yeah.
Not from the fact that someone, like I see it like this now, I'm a pastor, big deal. People don't look at me now and go, oh, cool, you're a pastor, I trust you. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way at all. And for me to go, I'm a pastor, you need to trust, is completely out of whack, because this takes time. And people need time to work it out and go, mate, are you for real?
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know. Are you maybe you are, maybe you're not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's part of that grind, you know, like being committed and faithful.
I think it's important. I don't know how much longer. I think we'll wrap it up soon. But one thing I probably just want to like elaborate on, and that I was just feeling is really important for, I say younger guys, people my age and younger, whatever, people our age and younger.
Our age.
That's it.
Our age, not Dan's age.
Our age.
You guys are in your 40. No, you're
Nah, not even close, mate. Not even close, mate.
Scott, are you close to 40? You're 40, huh?
I'm around that area. I'm 41.
I've got
Yeah,
a 4.
see?
I've got a 4 in there.
Yeah.
I've got a 3 before it.
Come
I'm
on.
41. Look, 25. No.
Yeah, it's
So
true,
here's my thought around why the relationship side and what I touched on before about having trust with someone is because this goes against the books about leadership and building yourself. This goes against this, but this has been my experience. Someone teaching you how to be punctual and doing all the basics, that doesn't change your heart. That just kind of gets your flesh life in order in some kind of way. It's the 1%ers that you don't want to tell people about. When you can change those because you're in relationship with someone, you can bring them to them and you actually trust them. Changing the 5% that no one sees is actually what will completely renew you. That's what will grow you. And so the reason I say that for people is to, there is a time and a place, and there is value in seeing someone who has different leadership qualities, who knows how to build things that you can learn from. But it can't be your be-all, end-all.
Yeah.
It's so much more important to find someone, doesn't have to be a pastor, but find someone who's definitely further along the journey. Man, find someone who's a good husband, find someone who they act like they know Jesus. They actually, like the things they do represents they have a relationship with Jesus.
Yep.
Those two things, they're a good husband, good wife, whatever they are. And then get around them for a while. Start to build a relationship where you can turn up and say, hey, I struggle with X, Y, Z. And over time, because you've got a relationship, those little 1%ers, if you can get those, because the enemy uses the ones that you don't bring to light.
Yep.
Absolutely.
The other stuff, the enemy doesn't worry about you showing up on time or not. As much as the leadership book tells you how important it is, he doesn't care if you're on time or late. But he likes to get into the little cracks that no one else knows about because you actually haven't got a relationship with someone who can disciple you.
And this is why we see so many big people fall.
Yeah, because there's probably, one, they're busy. 2, they're pushed up by the momentum behind them. And 3, they say they have a mentor or they have a board or whatever it is that keeps them accountable, but it's only accountable to the 50% that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're not accountable to the 5% about, hey, I'm dealing with hey, me and my wife don't even sleep in the same bedroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless you're not going to talk to your board, you're not going to talk to your pastor who's 20 years ahead of you and you guys knew each other when you were kids and he rings you up and says, you're doing a great job with your campuses. You don't have that relationship. So 100% is when we see those guys fall. Right. So my encouragement would be, man, chase someone that you can build a relationship and trust, and that might be the pastor, but at the same time, it could be someone who's a lot further along, who's healthy. And that's my final thought. Anything from you, Scott, before we wrap it up?
That's beautiful, mate.
Good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Yeah, it's been an interesting conversation. Started somewhere, went somewhere else, but I think it was good. I enjoyed it.
Very nice.
Speaking to myself most of the time. I'm just going to cut this, so it's actually, you guys won't be in it. I was going to tight shot. Whoa.